Doorbell at 11:19 p.m., trembling hands, and an empty terrarium in American silence. I'm Daniel Carter. I live in the suburbs of Gainesville, Florida, on a street of low houses, meticulously manicured lawns, and neighbors who greet you with a good morning while holding thermal coffee mugs. Here the night is usually a warm aquarium. Cicadas, sprinklers, a late car at the corner, the distant howl of a dog that can't learn to sleep. At 11:19 p.m., the doorbell rang 3 times, sharp rhythmic knocks like someone writing a message with their fingers. I opened the door, thinking it was the delivery guy who had gotten the wrong number. It was my next-door neighbor, Matthew Barnes, house 214. He smiled with his lips, but his hands trembled as if holding an invisible high-voltage wire. "Sorry about the hour, Dan," he said, his voice too soft for the sweat on his face. "I need help." In the first second, I thought, no. In the second, I noticed the smell that came from his hallway. Ammonia, warm substrate, thawed rodent, an odor of a terrarium that doesn't belong in any living room. It wasn't garden flowers. It was a living basement. What happened? My terrarium is empty. Did it break? No. The smile widened by a centimeter nervously. It opened. His hands trembled closer, his nails lightly tapping the knuckles of his fingers. A dark cap pushed the shadow to the middle of his eyes. Behind him, his house breathed air conditioning, but there was heat coming from the door, a humid breath that brought the world of glass and scales to my doorstep. "What kind of creature?" I asked dryly, as if checking the caliber before entering the room. He hesitated long enough to make me wish I'd locked the door. "Nothing native," he said quickly, "and it's not exactly legal, but it's controllable." The smile grew in the worst part of the sentence. "Do you have a flashlight?" I should have said no, that it was better to call wildlife immediately and let the law handle it first. Instead, the stupid part of my brain, the same part that believes in just a minute at 11 p.m., grabbed the flashlight, texted my wife, "I'm going to 214 quick thing," and followed Matthew. His house seemed normal until the side hallway. Stacked perforated plastic boxes, heating cables, bags of coconut fiber substrate, labels with handwritten names, some erased. The smell was persistent. The room with a yellow lamp had a shelf with 4 terrariums, 3 in use, one with a docile corn snake, another with a king snake, in the third, a gecko among fake plants. The 4th terrarium, the largest, had the lid displaced, a 2-finger gap in the left corner, crooked latches. Empty wasn't just absence, it was a reversed presence. The bottom was upturned, tracks erased, the mark of a heavy body, and that silence with an edge. Silence that listens back. Matthew touched the edge of the glass with the devotion of someone visiting a crib. "She's here." He wasn't looking at the terrarium. He was looking at the house. "I feel it." "What species?" The eyes ran to the kitchen and then back to me. "Bushmaster." He chewed the word like someone chewing a secret. "Juvenile." The name entered my throat like ice. Bushmaster. Lachesis. Not native, not a legend. She is the queen of don't play around. I didn't need Wikipedia to know that this did not belong in an American suburban neighborhood. His smile continued, but his hands trembled to the wrong rhythm. "You're crazy," I whispered, the anger rising inside me. "That's a crime here. In many states, without a license, it's a crime. Call someone now." "If I call first, I lose everything," he answered quickly. "If I contain it first, I explain. I know what I'm doing." He didn't. Or maybe he knew too much, and that's exactly why he had opened Pandora's box. Something vibrated above. Not a rattle, not a hiss. The classic disturbance of the ceiling. A body moving through beams. The light flickered. My flashlight swept the ceiling by reflex, and in that movement I noticed a gray blanket floating on the couch, like shallow seawater. The fabric rippled an inch, then another, as if breathing. I breathed with it, out of defense. The outline of a triangle emerged from the fabric, still beautiful cold. The head, the black eyes absorbed light like a well. "Slowly," Matthew whispered, already holding a long handling hook in his hand. The tremor in his fingers didn't match the precision with which he positioned the curve of the metal under the middle of the body. Gentle, firm, offering support like a rock in a riverbed. The blanket slid. The body came with dignity, heavy for a juvenile. The patterns, broken diamonds, a jungle tapestry glued to the skin. The couch breathed again and the head turned 2 degrees, the tongue tasting the air, calculating. The room shrank. The world fixed itself between the edge of the terrarium and the lid's track. "I'll place the body," Matthew said. "You push the lid and lock it twice." I nodded. The hook held, brought a generous arc. At the exact moment it was about to fall inside, the head did what cold heads do. It climbed the hook, scaling the metal like a tree. Matthew's smile died. The truth fell from his eyes. "If it comes on the hook, I'll let go." "Let go," I responded. He let go. The middle part dropped onto the glass. The body gave way. The head sought the next support, the rim of the terrarium, and I slammed the lid down in one motion. The impact was thunder in the room. The light flickered. The glass groaned with the shock of the head, tongue probing the non-existent crack. I locked it twice. I stopped breathing for 3 beats. The Bushmaster drew a patient 8 in the substrate, as if recalculating the root of the universe. "We did it," Matthew said, and the sound that came out was half laugh, half sob. I was going to leave right then. I was going to walk out, immediately call Fish and Wildlife, and end it. Until I noticed 3 things. The gap on the left of the lid was old wear. The makeshift latch, a plastic zip tie, was white from so much strain, and the curve of the hook had a dry, brown tooth mark. My flashlight swept the baseboard. The dust betrayed. This wasn't the first time it had opened. "What's behind that door?" I pointed to the hallway, where a white door carried the breath of the house. "Just equipment," he responded quickly. "Nothing that'll hurt you." "Open it." The doorknob gave with a confessional creak. The flashlight beam swept over translucent plastic boxes, sealed and perforated, name tags and dates, long tongs, syringes without needles, bottles of saline, bags of rodents, an old radio softly hissing with no station. 2 empty boxes, clean, aligned for later, 3 with contained life. In the corner, a long hook with a crumpled tip and dry stains that weren't rust. On the floor, the recent oval mark of a terrarium that had been there and was dragged into the room. The trail, as clear as a child's drawing. "How many are open, Matthew?" He stared at the floor like he was looking for water on a map. 4. "I opened them for cleaning. I've already closed 2. The 3rd, he pointed with his chin toward the room. The 4th is the one I haven't found." The radio hissed in a way that made my bones freeze. 3 short pops in the rhythm of the doorbell, and a breath that wasn't a full voice, but seemed to know my name. I swallowed the paranoia. The house, however, seemed to respond. From the ceiling, the dragging changed direction, heavier. "Drains, ceiling, and cracks," Matthew said like a recipe. "They choose the path of least resistance." "And the smallest bit of sense," I replied dryly. "No heroes, no experiment. And if we check the drain, we lock the drain. If it's the ceiling, just look. Afterward, I'll call." He nodded, his fingers betraying Jupiter in his blood. We went to the utility area. On the floor, the drain grate breathed a damp cold. It would have been my sanity check if not for the trail of fine sawdust, rodent bedding that betrayed a path, drawing a line from the cabinet to the base of the washing machine, disappearing through a round duct opening. "Don't pull," I said. "If there's a tail, we just trap it and let it descend." He agreed. He unscrewed the cover. The damp smell rose. A scaly touch scraped the PVC below. The light caught a living shape trying to understand the air. When the tail sprang out, he pressed it with the handle, a precise gesture the glove had made on other nights. I lowered the lid, metal on the rim. I locked it with my body. The push from inside tested the perimeter as cold intelligence does. 30, 40 seconds. The creature retreated an inch at a time, no struggle, just method. I screwed the bolts past steel straps twice. "Done," he said. "For now." From the ceiling, 2 bodies crossed paths slowly. The dust fell like a veil. The lamp buzzed. "The other one is upstairs," I said. "Maybe 2. We go up, we look, we don't handle, he promised. He grabbed the containment box, the net, the full hook. In the attic, the heat smelled of tile and guano. The flashlight cut through beams and long shadows like bad stories. The first American pit viper. Was it a copperhead or a cottonmouth with a betrayed pattern? No, it was something else, smaller, irregular pattern, coiled around a pipe, calm, condemned. Matthew rested the hook, transferred it like returning the creature to gravity. The box closed with a click. Further ahead, next to the air conditioner box, a larger diamond pattern retreated an inch, the head hidden under a beam. It wasn't the same one from the room, it was the other one. The tongue cut through the aircon for a second, and the shadow withdrew. "It will descend through the eaves when it cools," Matthew said, hypnotic. "If we close the doors of the world, it chooses the path out." We descended. I reinforced the door seals with thick tape. I locked the drains with cable ties. He crossed straps over the terrarium lid in the room. The radio in the bedroom was turned off, but it still seemed to watch. In the kitchen, a plastic jar fell with an absurd thud. The sawdust trail reappeared, fresh from the fridge to the stove. The shadow between them didn't move. It just was. "Enough," I said to myself. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m., I'll call, with or without you." Matthew didn't argue. He nodded, broken smile, hands still trembling. On the way out, I glanced at the room one last time. The Bushmaster drawing a determined 8, the kingsnake still, the gecko with stone eyes, and, at the baseboard, a recently shed skin, coiled like a crescent moon. It wasn't from the one we trapped. It was another story beginning. "No more opening anything," I said from the door, "and if anything rings your doorbell at 3, you don't open it. You call me, and I'll call whoever the law tells me to." He nodded. Understood. I crossed the street with my body stiff, head buzzing. In my living room, the couch breathed the weariness of my fear. I taped the drains shut, more out of superstition than engineering. I wrote him, 8 a.m., no hero. I slept in pieces. The early morning still did me the favor of lending me the sound of 3 distant metallic taps, or maybe it was the heater shutting off. The mind, on nights like this, bites back. Morning arrived with protocol. Agents knocked on the gate. The house became a risk map, and the neighbor tried to hold on to what never fit in his hands. Subscribe to the Serpent Shadows channel so you don't miss the next chapters. Starting now, every crack counts. The Florida sun woke the street too early, a dry shine that didn't match the previous night. I had barely slept. The echo of the 3 metallic taps kept repeating in my head. At 7:02 a.m., and I was already up, trying a coffee that had no taste. Matthew's message blinked on my phone. 8 a.m. come, she's contained, but we need to talk. The contained didn't reassure me, not after seeing that skin at the baseboard and feeling his house breathe from all sides. I went to 214 in closed boots, flashlight in my pocket, and the direct number for Florida Fish and Wildlife open on the screen. His gate was ajar, and Matthew waited for me on the porch, no smile, no feverish air from the previous night, but his hands still trembling. "Did you sleep?" I asked. "Not with..." "That's still in the air," he replied, averting his gaze. As I entered, I noticed the difference. The terrarium smell was weaker, but still present. The Bushmaster was on the glass, still, almost sculpted, with 2 plastic straps crossing the lid and a padlock in the center. But the left lid, even though it was fastened, showed the old wear of the pin, like a scar that could open at any moment. "The others?" I asked. I caught the copperhead in the ceiling, put it in the box, but... He stopped and breathed. "There's a cottonmouth in the yard, behind the fence." I didn't argue. I pulled out my phone, dialed Wildlife. The dispatcher was direct. "Keep your distance. Unit is on the way. Don't handle the animal. We'll be there in 20 minutes. Matthew didn't complain. I think even he knew his margin had run out. While we waited, I walked with him down the hallway. The plastic boxes were hastily labeled. Copperhead, ceiling, kingsnake, safe. 2 others with contained movement. 2 boxes, however, were empty and clean. That's when I heard a noise coming from the back room. Not a rattle, not a hiss, but the dry sound of plastic hitting wood. I entered with the flashlight ahead. In the corner, a rodent food container had fallen. Sawdust spread across the floor, forming a fine trail that disappeared under a cabinet. I didn't like the idea that it might be a prey trail, or from the one who hunts. At 8:22 a.m., the green wildlife SUV pulled up. 2 agents, a woman in a green jumpsuit with a badge, a tall man carrying a hard case. The protocol was quick: identification, visual assessment, and soon the order for us to step back. The agent approached the Bushmaster terrarium, observed calmly and said, "This poorly adjusted latch is an accident waiting to happen. Who installed it?" "I did," I answered, and he reinforced it with the straps. "Good improvisation, but the left pin, if she pushes at the right time, it comes off." They captured the snake like they were performing a dance they'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Head hook, acrylic tube, double lock, identification, padded transport box. The glass was empty, and I hated the déjà vu feeling. Then the bedroom. Each box received a new label. They checked each lock, noted times and distances. The copperhead captured in the ceiling remained calm, but the agent looked at me when she moved the 3rd box. "Are you hearing that?" A faint dragging sound came from above, from the attic. Her partner understood without words. They went up. 3 minutes later, they came down with the 2nd prisoner of the day, a massive rat snake, probably escaped for weeks, living like a ghost guest in the woodwork. The wall was next. We went out through the back. The gap between the concrete blocks was narrow, shadow cast by the neighbor's lemon tree. Sawdust reached there too. The agent positioned the flexible sheet, closed the side passage, and the female agent probed with the hook. First came the silence. Then the triangular head appeared, tasted the air and withdrew. 2 precise taps with the hook, and the cottonmouth entered the box as if following a script. Lid closed. Label: "My breath." Back in the living room, the agent began filling out the paperwork, while her partner gathered all the irregular materials: unlicensed terrariums, adapted tongs, non-compliant transport containers. "You'll be charged with possession and public safety violations," she told Matthew, dry and professional. He signed in silence. For a moment he looked at me, and I saw gratitude and hatred sharing the same face. Gratitude for helping with the capture, hatred for me having called in the authorities. When the truck took the boxes with the snakes, the sound of the doors closing seemed to also close the invisible force field that had surrounded the street all night. Matthew stood in the yard, watching the vehicle disappear. He spoke, not looking at me. "I took good care of them." "Caring is keeping them where they don't pose a risk," I replied. I went back home with the sense that even though the boxes were empty now, the story still breathed in some corner. As I locked my door, I imagined, or did I hear, 3 dry knocks coming from my garage. Maybe it was just the metal expanding in the morning heat. Maybe. Will we find out why, even with all the animals collected, Matthew's house kept breathing and the sound of the 3 knocks didn't stop? Subscribe so we can continue, and Serpent Shadows will show how stories end or continue in the cracks. The wildlife vehicles had barely turned the corner when my street already looked different. Bright light, birds back, children with backpacks walking on the sidewalk. It would be easy to believe the previous night was just too much coffee, if it weren't for the detail that my skin still hadn't understood we were safe. Matthew remained on the porch, arms crossed, staring at the emptiness left by the truck that took each box, each collected terrarium. His house from a distance now seemed clean, neutral. Up close, and it was impossible to explain this to anyone who hadn't been inside, there was still a pulse. It wasn't sound, it wasn't wind. It was like it was breathing through the cracks. "So, is that it?" I asked, standing at the gate. "It is." "And it isn't," he replied with a half smile that didn't sit well with me. "They took the trees, miss, but the roots are still there." I didn't like the metaphor. Matthew turned and went inside, leaving the door open. It was the unspoken invitation that made me cross the yard. The interior was different. The room that had once been full of boxes was now just a shelf, dust marked by lighter rectangles where the terrariums had been. In the living room, the large piece of furniture that had held the Bushmaster now displayed nothing but clean glass, like a frame waiting for a picture. The absence was almost as oppressive as the presence. That's when I noticed. The old radio, turned off was now on the coffee table and not in the handling room. "Did you move this radio?" I asked. "No, I haven't touched it since you left." Before I could respond, the device hissed on its own. It wasn't a voice nor common interference, 3 metallic pops in the same rhythm as the doorbell from the previous night. And then, complete silence. Matthew forced a laugh. It must have picked up a signal from some baby monitor down the street. "At 11 a.m., I asked. I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. The light there, so normal, let me see through the back window the view of the wall where they had found the cottonmouth. I followed the gaze. There was a new mark, recent, as if something had climbed up the exterior side of the plaster, a series of soft scratches in a straight line. Is there something else out there?" I raised my voice. Matthew approached from the side, peered out, and his silence was enough of an answer. We went back inside. As I closed the door, I felt a gust of humid air rush out from under the threshold, brief, as if the interior had exhaled. "Do you hear that?" I asked. "It's the house adjusting its temperature." The sentence died in the middle. His gaze froze on the ceiling of the living room. I followed his gaze. There, on the floorless drywall ceiling, a small dark spot was forming. Water? It didn't make sense. It was dry, warm. The stain grew a bit, as if a shadow was moving from the inside, looking for an escape. "Tell me you closed everything in the attic," I said, more as an order than a question. "I did," he said. His voice lacked certainty. "But I left the vent screens." We went up. The attic was clean, too clean. No sign of the boxes from the previous day, no handling tools left behind. But one of the vent openings on the side wall had the wire pushed outward. And in the dust, the zigzag trail was visible, too large to be from a rodent. Matthew swallowed hard. This could be from yesterday, or from now. A light sound, almost like crumpled tissue paper, came from under our feet toward the kitchen. We looked at each other. We descended quickly. In the kitchen, nothing was out of place, except for the plastic lid of the sawdust container on the floor, face up, and then, from the radio in the living room, 3 more metallic taps, but this time, between the second and third, before the final silence. My name. Not shouted, not spoken, whispered, viscous, like air passing through a forked tongue. Daniel. Matthew reached for the radio to turn it off, but I had already unplugged it. The static continued for 3 seconds after the power was cut, as if the sound never needed the device to enter. "The wildlife took everything, remember?" he said, maybe to me, maybe to himself. "Matthew..." I started, but stopped, looking at the wall, looking at the ceiling, looking at the radio. It felt like the house had more roots than walls. "You know what I think?" he murmured. "Some things, when they adapt, they don't need glass anymore." I didn't want to ask, things like what? I already knew the answer. He then took a deep breath and said, "You need to come back here tonight. I want to show you why empty doesn't always mean safe." Silence. The wall clock read 11:37. Outside, the day was bright and clear. Inside, the air smelled warm, like burnt substrate and something else, something alive. Returning to the house at night, Matthew's proof, and the type of presence that neither cage nor authority can remove. From here, Serpent Shadows closes the arc, and you'll understand why some terrariums never truly stay empty. I returned to 214 when the sun had already set, even though everything inside me screamed not to cross that street again. It was 9:54 p.m. The neighborhood was in that artificial calm that precedes the midnight hours, an occasional car passing slowly, warm lights filtering through curtains, the distant sound of TV from rooms that hadn't yet turned silent. Matthew was waiting for me on the porch, but this time he wasn't smiling. There was something tense in the way he held the slightly ajar door, as if fearing something, or someone, might pass by on its own. "Ready?" He wasn't talking to me. He was speaking to the house. I entered. The first thing I felt was the contrast with the outside. The air was warmer, almost humid, and carried back that sweet, sour smell of used substrate mixed with a hint of mold from live wood. It shouldn't have smelled like that, not after the cleaning and the seizures. In the living room, the terrarium that had once housed the Bushmaster remained there, empty. But on the coconut fiber bottom, there was a mark that hadn't existed when the agents took the snake. A compact curve, well defined, as if something thick had settled there for hours and then left, without opening the lid. Matthew saw that I noticed but didn't say anything. "Come on." He made a quick gesture, guiding me down the hallway. In the handling room, now deserted, the radio was on again, low, random static interspersed with pauses. I looked at him. "Did you turn this on?" "No, this outlet is disconnected from the grid," he replied dryly. "Still listen whenever the street falls silent." I stopped next to the radio. A chill ran up my neck. The static wasn't constant. There were precise intervals like muffled knocks. Counting mentally, I realized the pattern. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. "Just like the doorbell that night," I whispered. He nodded, his gaze lost. Then, before I could take another step, a gust of air came from the hallway, that humid, almost warm air that seemed to pulse from inside the house. It was enough for a movement to catch my attention out of the corner of my eye. In the kitchen, the cabinet door under the sink slowly swayed, as if pushed from the inside. We went over. The flashlight illuminated the gap, and in the back, beyond the metal siphon, the shadow moved. Slow, oval, pulsing. I couldn't see the head, nor the tail, but I saw the curve slide and disappear, entering an irregular hole in the wall, large enough for a thicker body to pass through. Matthew slammed the cabinet shut, propping a chair in front of it. "It's not her," he said, almost to himself. "The one from the empty terrarium is heavier." We returned to the living room, and it was only when we crossed it that we heard, loud and clear, the 3 metallic taps. Not from the radio, but from the ceiling, as if something had knocked directly on the plaster above our heads. Simultaneously, the radio responded with the same sound, but followed by a disfigured breath, and in the middle of it a word. My name. Matthew closed his eyes, took a deep breath and said, "It's time. I'll show you the attic." We climbed through the hatch, which creaked like an old throat. Up there the air was suffocating. The flashlight cut through beams and dusty boxes. For a few seconds everything seemed static, until the light fixed on a point in the far corner. A clear, recent streak where the dust had been swept by something large dragging itself. At the end of it, beside the ventilation grate, pieces of skin. Fresh. And the diamond pattern wasn't from a copperhead, nor a rat snake, nor the Bushmaster. It was different. Matthew spoke softly. "There wasn't anything like this here yesterday." A snap came from the grate, and the flashlight caught movement behind it. Something curled up, disappearing through the opening to the outside. We rushed down to the backyard, and there it was, the external grate swaying. And just ahead, in the corner between the wall and the wooden fence, 2 deep marks in the dirt, as if the body of something heavy had rested there just before disappearing into the darkness. Matthew crouched, ran his fingers over the mark and whispered, his voice a mixture of fascination and sheer terror. "She was never just in the terrarium." At that moment, I realized, an empty terrarium doesn't mean safety. Sometimes it means that what was inside now resides in the house itself. And after that, the house never stops breathing. I left without saying goodbye, feeling that each step toward my door was followed by eyes that don't blink. And when I crossed the living room to leave the flashlight on the table, I heard very faintly from my own ceiling, 3 taps. Don't forget to subscribe to the Serpent Shadows channel so you don't miss the next reports that even make walls breathe.